Hello, good evening. Thank you for joining us for The Late Show. I do want to say, first of all, that it's a very special day that we started today, and the year is, Tim, Vince?
5785.
Yes. And would it have started at 6 o'clock?
Tonight, yeah, as soon as the sun went down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rosh Hashanah.
Feast of Trumpets. Yeah. Happy New Year, Hal.
Yeah, Happy New Year too to you, Tim.
And the fire, in a sad way, a sombre way, the fireworks have been out tonight for the New Year.
Well, I'm pretty bereft of a lot of energy today or tonight. Had a really difficult day in that sense, but what I wanted to do before we started, and obviously we'll deal with a lot of the questions that you may have about what's happening, and also we'd like to hear your point of view as well from what has been happening in the last 48 hours, particularly with regards to Israel having been barraged by 200 rockets or more. So let's see what tonight's going to unfold. If there's any breaking news or anything, we are live, so we can deal with that as well. But I just wanted to say that this morning I did have a little bit more energy, let me put it like that. And so I'm going to play 3 minutes from the beginning of our mornings, which sets the scene a little bit, and was able to perhaps express some of the things that I might not be able to get out of myself tonight, because there was something, I think, towards the end of that 3 minutes where it really was a bit punchy, and maybe some might say a little bit over the top, but it's worth repeating anyway. So spare the time for me, and give a thought to what we're going to be talking about tonight as well. And that may come from the lips of one of us two, and also from you, the viewer, live at revelationtv.com. So 3 minutes of our mornings for you. Yeah. Hello, good morning. Welcome to our mornings, part one. Part one will be myself and Tim Vince. Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good morning. Everything's the same. I think we get so little sleep. I don't know.
The night is far gone.
I don't know what day of night it is, or even what day of the week it is. It is Wednesday. It is the 2nd of October. And we're very pleased to be able to come to you in wherever you're watching, wherever in the world, etc. To a certain extent, how can I say this without upsetting somebody? Always, whatever we say, we upset somebody. I'm really pleased that we are where we are with regards to Israel actually standing up against the axis of evil. Can I put it very bluntly like that? Iran and everything that it stands for, Hezbollah, everything it stands for, the Houthis, Hamas, they're all getting what they deserve. Now that might shock some of you, because the thing is, nobody likes the repercussions of war. It's really sad because innocent people do suffer. But for once and for all, people have to know the truth and why Israel has to be in the position it's in, and defending itself is not just a right that it has no alternative. And you push anyone to the brink where their existence is at stake, you're on a personal level or on a state level, a country or whatever, or a regime, you have to look for why we're in the situation we're in. And so many people, when I listen to the radio, the television, they pretty much don't have a clue as to why Israel has to do what it's doing. And Tim, there's a certain amount of hypocrisy by people like Keir Starmer, okay? You know, and even Biden, they always were saying, Israel, stop. Everybody said, calm down. They had to put up with what happened on October the 7th, and then on October the 8th from Hezbollah. All of these things, how much did they have to take? All their people had to move from the Northern Territory, etc., etc. Okay, Gaza's having its problems as well, and now Lebanon is. But why? It's because of the belief of those terrorists that Israel should not exist at all. Let's be right out in the open. We have been for doing this on Revelation TV for a long time, but I think we have to hammer it home that Israel isn't a rogue state. In fact, when you look at some of the headlines, you could actually read it like that, but it's not. Who is it that is to blame? It's an ideology that comes from the Quran and from the Hadith. Islam is the problem. And I'm not saying this out of hate. It's just an obvious thing when you look at history, you read what their ideology is saying, to kill the Jew wherever you find them. So you can't get any clearer than that. That's what they're at. And that's why they've brought it all on themselves. Okay, thanks for putting up with that. Tim, why have we got the apple and the honey here? May I just say that?
Because that is basically what is always given out on the Rosh Hashanah New Year. The apple is the now, the word of God for now, let's say. The honey is, so apples are lovely when they're fresh, but they don't last, a bit like the manna in the wilderness. But the honey is almost like a preservative, but also it lasts longer.
It's
it doesn't
sweet
perish.
as well.
Yeah, and it's sweet, whereas the apple is sharper.
Right.
So it's actually quite apt for the situation we're in today.
But honey has something to do, from memory, with the almost the Tate and Lyle symbol, but it was to do with the lion.
Yes.
And inside, of course, was the honey. And that particular story comes from
Samson and Delilah. Well, Samson.
Yeah, Samson, yeah.
But Delilah sort of fell for it.
Yeah, right. Okay, so Tim, you shared the scriptures this morning, which I thought were very apt from Psalm 91. But you've got some other parts of the Psalms. Share with our viewers. And as we're looking at a live view, by the way, of Jerusalem as we speak, it is coming live.
Yeah, so Psalm 91, I read just a few verses. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. And then it goes on. You will not, verse 5, you will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day. And then if you go further on, 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. I could be talking about missiles. And then it says in verse 9, the Lord is my refuge, and you make the Most High your dwelling. No harm will overtake you. No disaster will come near your tent, for He will command His angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. And then, as you mentioned, the lion, verse 13, you will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. Because He loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for He acknowledges my name. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him with long life. I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. So that is looking at the Jewish people and those who are there praying even as we speak, by the not knowing what a day will bring. But the other psalm that came to me was Psalm 83, not the beginning but later on. And it says, make them, verse 13, make them as tumbleweed. These are the enemies of Israel. My God, make them as tumbleweed, like chaff before the wind. As fire consumes the forest or a flame sets the mountains ablaze, so pursue them with your tempest and terrify them with your storm. Cover their faces with shame, Lord, so that they will seek your name. You see, there's a purpose in it. May they ever be ashamed and dismayed. May they perish in disgrace. Let them know that you, whose name is the Lord, that you alone are the Most High over all the earth. You see, that's one of the objectives of Islam, is to subdue the earth, that the whole earth will be taken for Islam. Well, the scriptures has something to say about that.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Tim. By the way, those pictures that we just showed, as far as the last night is concerned, the rockets that were being released from Iran, well, that's not live for tonight. Okay, just make sure you know that. The live bit that we're showing is of the area where the remains of the temple, was called the Wailing Wall. You know, that is there, and that shot there is live, and we'll be coming to it throughout the evening as well. There is a song which Nathan, our producer, has actually come up with. I think it's very appropriate. Gaithers were singing Blow the Trumpet. But I would say it should have been called Sound the Alarm in Zion, because that keeps coming up in almost a chorus. It'd be really good to celebrate the new year with some joy as well amongst all of the things that are going on, because there is great sadness as well. Some people are losing their lives as we speak as well, probably. So we need to be mindful of that, but at the same time, we have the victory through the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Here is the song. Such great memories of when we were there so many times, Tim, and the warmth of the evening, the greatness and the atmosphere of being there. It was so thrilling. But it's also at the same time, you know, the joy. You know, it's just an atmosphere that you don't get anywhere else in the world. You know, absolutely. And it's so sad that we haven't got that happiness in these last couple of days, particularly when we're looking at
by God's grace. By God's grace, we'll be back, and there'll be a wonderful time together. Yeah, well, Nathan had recommended, bless him, to have a look at Joel chapter 2, couple of verses there. Let me just read that, especially after that song. It says, "Blow the trumpet in Zion and sound the alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. Surely it is near. A day of darkness and gloom, as like we saw last night, a day of clouds and thick darkness, as the dawn is spread over the mountains. So there is a great and mighty people. There has never been anything like it before, nor will it ever be again after it. To the years of many generations to come, I would say we have a great future. But what we have to deal with right now is our enemies. And we know and understand
what motivates our enemies, as I said in my little opening this morning on our mornings, is recognizing that those particularly are the people of Iran, which all just goes back to the times of Esther, when they tried to eradicate, to remove every Jew from the land of Persia at that time. Somehow it's stuck in their DNA, as I was saying this morning, and we can't seem to get rid of it. But is the head of the snake going to be chopped off?
I hope so. I heard, it was on Channel 4 News, just a very short exchange with Kathy Newman and Mike Pompeo, who was the US Secretary of State. She asked him about Iran, and he said, now's the time to crush the regime. And I believe that's right. I mean, it's only the Lord knows when the serpent's head will be crushed. Some would say it was at the time of the cross, and he was defeated. But one day he'll be completely eradicated in the lake of fire. Yeah.
Why is it then, well, that's a silly question, why is it that the likes of the leaders of our Western world do not see that Israel has to take the head right now and go to battle with
Stephen
snake?
writes, Howard, because you said the viewers can contribute, and it just happens to be the one opened. Starmer and Biden talking up support for Israel while holding back certain weapons reminds me of the American Indian saying, white man speaks with forked tongue.
I love it.
That answers your question.
Yeah.
So why is it? It's because they've got divided loyalties and it's a forked tongue.
Yeah. But is it not, but they're just, Israel has to take Iran on right now. Do you agree? Or don't you agree? Let us know your thoughts live at revelationtv.com. We, I think, who understand the scriptures and the prophecies particularly, leaves us in no doubt that there has to be a day of reckoning and to remove the head of the snake. The serpent, the original devil, as it were, but incarnate in some way, attached to the Ayatollahs. And yet they have the audacity to actually call us the little Satan.
Exactly. And by the way, it was conquered by Islam, Iran. Historically, and in terms of the history going back to Esther, many Jews lived there. Many Christians were there. There's a revival, a Christian revival there now. So all we need to do, as it were, is remove that principality of Haman. Which is really imprisoning the whole land, and who knows what is possible. They have no right. I mean, we should take authority and say that Islam has no right to be shackling the Iranian people.
I know, because they at large probably would support Israel.
Yeah.
Because I know
they used to.
Several Iranians, even just in the last week, I've met a family from Iran, and they are very much against the Ayatollah.
So it's pretty high stakes, isn't it? Because if a sort of hypothetical, if Israel were defeated, that whole Middle East would be under a cloud of darkness. It's not just, I mean, they've had a really dark and evil influence, but just imagine if Israel wasn't there. I think it would be like a pebble of evil in the whole world's pond. And it's very, very high stakes, and I certainly think we should keep praying for that. Praying that's also that Israel are losing so many of their soldiers. Already we heard today they lost 8 in Lebanon. They've got air superiority in Iran. They won't have an opportunity like this with a weak American president who speaks with a forked tongue, who's half asleep. Half the time. So therefore, you've got to be decisive.
Yeah. I was listening to LBC this morning, Nick Ferrari, who does a good job, but he's still limited on his knowledge as far as the history of Israel. I was listening to people ringing in as well, and I know I'm banned, and they don't take any notice of me. I wrote in, just before I came on the show this morning, on our mornings, I said, okay, for crying out loud, get your audience to read Hamas's charter, which states out very clearly that they want to kill every Jew and let alone bring an end to the legitimate state of Israel. But Hamas, nor Hezbollah, and especially the leaders of Iran, do not have any other sort of ideal object is to get rid of the Jews. So, and Gordon's book is amazing in the fact that it spells it all out. It started off as a pamphlet he was going to put together, but he put this book together, and it's amazing really how detailed it is, and how, you know, it's called Israel, Gaza, and Hamas. And the charter in there, and that's why I was writing to LBC this morning, but they never read it out, I don't think so.
I don't want to drop Gordon in it, and I might be speaking out of turn, but he's writing another book.
Yeah.
On Hezbollah.
Quite rightly so.
Lebanon.
Quite rightly so. Brilliant. And I just want to say that take every opportunity we can to support Israel, because that's what we do. And I think the timing for them to strike Iran is now. Do you agree or not? Email live@revelationtv.com.
Look at how Hezbollah at the moment is in disarray. They've decapitated the leadership, not just Nasrallah, but all of the upper echelons. Maybe that's what needs to be done in Iran, and that regime would crumple quite quickly. And
well,
Eddie
that's
writes,
a good point.
Yeah, Eddie writes, after the last jihadist thug thought he was safe in a concrete bunker, I wonder how the supreme leader of Iran feels now. Because they got Sinwar, they got, what's his name? Someone, I've forgotten his name already, because he's disappeared into history, but he was the leader of Hamas. They got him in Iran. And, you know, Sinwar's underground if he's still alive. And it makes a difference if you can get these people who are demonized, who are, you know, as it were, capturing the whole people. If you can get rid of them. It's like Ceausescu, when they got rid of him, you know, Romania was free.
Yeah. And the disaster and the state of that country, actually, I was there pretty much just straight after Ceausescu's demise, and I was astounded at how, 40 years behind the rest of Europe it was, and the way in which the people had to give birth to as many children as 5 children, but they couldn't look after them. And when I visited the orphanage, it was devastating to see how, you know, those poor children had to work their way through life in a really bad state under such Dickensian
Ismail
orphanages.
Haniyeh was the chap who was killed in Iran, and he was like the main leader. He was a billionaire because he'd made so much money off the back of the Palestinians and money from the world, but he's gone.
I wanted to give our viewers a heads up on something that I caught a little bit of it last week when we finished one of the late shows. Went to Gordon and Lorna's, and they were watching a particular program that was on the BBC where they were showing from the perspective of the youngsters that were at the musical festival in the southern part of Israel when Hamas attacked unexpectedly. And you saw the devastation and the way in which some of the Hamas soldiers were almost
That's the one
laughing.
from Paramount, which was played on the BBC.
Yes.
I think we can play it now if you want.
Can we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that's important, because I heard your chap, not your chap, but Nick Ferrari, being questioned by someone, I don't know, it may have been this morning, who refused to talk about October the 7th.
Yeah.
Everyone knows, every historian will know that's how all this started.
Yeah.
So it's worth watching.
Yeah, well, again, a little bit of a warning, because although this is nowhere as horrific as what really you saw in the actual program on the BBC, which I have to take my hats off to BBC to give them credit that they allowed this documentary to be shown, because it is a real eye-opener as to what went on October the 7th last year. So have a look at this little trailer, and then I'm going to give you, if we can, how to look it up and on iPlayer. So have a watch of this anyway.
I'm never going to be the person that I was before the 7th of October.
The Nova Party was amazing. I've not seen anything remotely close to that in years in Israel. 3,500 people went to dance for peace and for love.
I see a bunch of people looking up to the sky.
ואז אני מסתכל ימינה ואני רואה זרקורים של אור מגיעים מרחוק.
The most rockets I've ever seen in my life from Gaza. I thought to tell my friends to leave, but it was already too late.
And then I heard the first bullet.
אולי יש פה חוליות מחבלים.
ופשוט אני מרגיש את הכדורים מעל הראש שלי.
אני אפול על הרצפה, להתחזה למת.
אני מתחבאת פה בתוך המקרר. אני הולכת למות היום.
Everyone was trying to call some authority. No one was really answering.
איך אין פה צבא? איך אין פה צבא? לא אכפת לי למות, כאילו, כמו שזה פחד על המשפחה שלי. אני לא מגיעה להם לקבור ילדה.
I remember seeing a terrorist with the Hamas symbol on his head, and he was smiling, like it was a game.
אחד מתשעה אנשים פשוט כאילו לא שרד שם. העתיד שלם שהיה לי בידיים. איפסו לי.
הזרחה הראשונה שראיתי הייתה יפה, ואז הזרחה השנייה שראיתי הייתה פשוט נוראית.
I'm never going to be the person that I was before the 7th of October, and I'm trying to figure out who I'm going to be now.
Every single person that I lost on that day would have made the hell out of this life. And for them, I need to continue living.
I was struck this morning by the Daily Mirror headline because it had a picture of the Ayatollah, and then it had the headline, Revenge from Above. And I thought that was playing into their narrative, which is that the Ayatollah, which means by definition oracle of God, has spoken, as it were, from on high, and Israel was experiencing divine retribution from above. And I thought that that's where our media overstepped the line. Or maybe they're trying to ingratiate themselves to the Iranian regime. It's for them to say. But as it says, you don't pick a fight with anyone who buys ink by the barrel load. So I might have to hold my voice back a little.
Yes, to be able to get it and watch it on iPlayer, the title is We Will Dance Again, and subtitle, Surviving October the 7th. There you go. Surviving October the 7th, We Will Dance Again. Can you actually read that? As
Not
far
really.
as
It's sort of in a small text.
It's HTTPS colon, or is it a colon? Or is it? I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then We Will Dance Again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
By the way, Howard, I think it was misguided. You know, this sort of peace, love and peace is going to somehow ward off Iran is slightly naive. And obviously it was absolutely terrible and tragic and absolutely unjustifiable. But equally, there are some within Israel and around the world who think that you can, you know, as it were, just wag your finger at Iran and you're going to be okay, but that's not I'm afraid the reality.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
What?
No, just making me think about what you said during the break
Earlier.
as well.
Well, I mean, you think that if you want my opinion, how things turned out so badly here in the West, in the UK, is that we turned a blind eye to the fatwa against Salman Rushdie. We let them come out on the streets calling for his death and did nothing about it, and allowed this massive influx of an alien cult, I would say, to call for the death of a British citizen. Now, when they got the green light on that, we've had no end of protests, and eventually someone's got to say enough is enough.
Good point, good point. Any more emails coming in?
Hopefully they'll go for you before they come.
Thank you, thanks a lot. Okay.
Dear Howard and Tim, those 3 minutes said so much, Howard. The UN is evil, the EU is evil, and the terrorists who brought about all the misery and destruction, not only for Israel, but their own country too, are evil. Each one of them born with Satan's DNA. That's from David in Ireland. Pastor Tim and Julie, as we see wars and rumours of wars on the increase, your updates are much needed in order to prepare for the inevitable persecution, i.e. birth pains, that will be coming to us as believers in Yeshua, Jesus.
And I think what we are seeing and witnessing almost on a daily basis are the birth pangs. And just as my daughter has just given birth, prematurely, may I say as well, and she certainly felt the birth pangs for some time. And that's why we were a bit slow in saying, oh, it's okay, you know, you've still got another month to go. And these become more and more frequent, and this was the words that Jesus used. These birth pains are going to happen as we head for the return of Christ. So rumours of wars and nation against nation, and I would actually say that is the beginning of the birth pangs. But we're seeing all sorts of things in our society, the way in which we're so against everything that God stands for. Mostly that's what we're seeing in our society, very rebellious, even talking about how that there would be an increase in crime, how there would be a falling away from the truth, from the Word of God, how there would be, if you like, this polarization that has happened over the last few years, particularly since COVID. I think there's a change in the wind, a change in the atmosphere. People don't really want to knuckle down to get to do a work. Yeah. You know, they're looking for an easy way out.
Division in the nation, big time.
Yeah, definitely a division, even between neighbour and neighbour. And it said, Jesus said, even within the families, there would be a difference of opinion to the point where it separates one from another. So all of these are not only just physical signs, but they're tied in with our emotions as well, and the psyche. And we're seeing a lot more young people, sadly, losing hope for the future, and suicides on the increase, and also a lack of hope. And especially when you're looking at how most people dream of having their own home and not being able to, but so they give up. Yeah. But if they knew, like I did when I was a youngster, knew by reading the scriptures and understanding this amazing hope for the future, you know, Revelation chapter 21 says it all really about what is to come in the good side and aspect of life.
Yeah, and the wonderful thing about Israel is that it's a metaphor for us, you know, and even our own personal lives and the nations, in that, you know, when they have strayed, you know, they've been judged, but God has restored them, and you know, there's the grace of God. I've got a lot of emails coming in. Shall I have it?
Yes.
So, this is from J. MacWolf, and that's the email. But it's the Lord recently gave me Psalm 60 regarding Islam and its threat on Israel and our nation. I know that because we've been studying it for our Bible studies, and it was a miktam of David that's rooted in the story of when he went battling in the north, and he left his flank open, and Edom came in, but then he sent Joab down, and it says, I think they slaughtered 12,000 Edomites. So it's not exactly Iran, but it again shows God's grace, because you know, they had made a mistake and they had left themselves exposed, and Israel in one sense did leave themselves exposed to the Hamas attack a year ago.
Yes, which was very unusual.
Then they came back with retribution, and that's That's so important. And Pauline says, I'm so glad you've spoken up forcefully. What's needed to have said? I hate the anti-Semitism here in Ireland and what's happening in my home of UK. Keir Starmer is so hypocritical. It's annoying that he can't afford to pay pensioners, but now funds UNRWA again. That's a very good point.
Very good. Can we talk about that?
Yes,
Because
go.
UNRWA was actually, we even found to have one of the Hamas leaders, as it were, was get on the payroll of UNRWA, which is our money that's sent there supposedly for the Palestinians. Yeah. And we know that a lot of the education which is given to the younger Palestinians is all with hatred, filled with hatred towards the Jews. Many would say, oh, well, what Israel is doing is only going to actually breed a new brood of fighters because we've got evidence that the young children as young as 3 and 4 and 5, 6 years of age are wearing the combatants for Hamas and also learning the ways of war at such an early age and full of hatred,
and
towards Israel.
And people say, oh, it's going to get escalation, but it can't be any worse. I mean, it can't be any worse than what they've done over the last 20 years in Gaza, surely. Yeah. And, UNRWA, it's outrageous. Talk about a forked tongue to be supporting UNRWA again, being totally exposed. If UNRWA was so great, why was the funding cut? By Britain, by Germany, by, other countries.
But they soon forgot that why we did that.
Outrageous.
So what went wrong? Who initiated it to be reinstated?
Yeah.
Who?
Yeah. It's nuts. Anyway, Dory writes, it was Psalm 83, which I read out this morning at our prayer meeting. I've heard a Messianic Jew saying this is where we are in prophecy. Yeah, last year, it's amazing how it mentions all of these nations. This one is from Dino. Israel is beset with enemies on all sides. As Christians, we need to stand strong with our Jewish brothers and sisters. The time for pacification is over. Iran is run by men who detest everything the free world stands for. And this wicked, ungodly regime needs to be eradicated. And it is Israel, a small but mighty nation, who is leading the charge. Christians the world over need now to get off the fence. War is coming to this planet, as is Christ, and we had better be ready. We truly are now living in the last moments. All the signs are clear as daylight. Israel will not be defeated despite the weakness of the West in their lack of support for God's chosen people.
Yeah. And thankfully, I believe that, Netanyahu is the man for the job.
Exactly.
And I think he got a little bit more respect of late, because there were those that were demonstrating, Israelis who were demonstrating against Netanyahu's stance, especially when it came to the fact that he didn't seem to be doing enough to get release the hostages. And because of that, there was a division. But also, and I hate it when they say, oh, Netanyahu, he needs to be in this war-like mode because he wants the job to continue. He wants to stay prime minister for a longer time. It's not that at all.
Go back.
He is the one who's been chosen, I believe.
Well,
God.
What does his name mean? God has given.
Is that what it means?
Oh. He's a gift of God. I mean, the scriptures we've been reading are not actually, man do this, how great you are, Israel, the IDF, and it's saying God's going to do this. God's going to make them as tumbleweed. He's going to pursue them in his wrath.
We have the perfect clip.
Okay.
Have a watch of this, please.
Iran hurled 181 ballistic missiles at Israel, creating terrifying visions in the skies all over the country.
Certainly this was a significant attack, probably about twice the size in terms of scope of what we saw earlier.
Almost 10 million Israelis were forced to scramble to shelters and hunker down. The barrage was aimed at 3 Israeli military bases and Mossad headquarters, but the missiles came streaking down at civilian populations from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. Israel intercepted most of the rockets, but some hit. One killed a Palestinian in Jericho, the only fatality. Another hit a Chabad school in Gadara, resulting in extensive damage, but no students were harmed. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised America for warning Israel in advance of the attack and shooting down a dozen of the incoming missiles.
I also thank the United States for its support in our defense effort.
Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei reportedly ordered the strike in retaliation for Israel's decimation of Hezbollah and the assassinations of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah and Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh. Khamenei is in a secure location as Israel vows to strike back.
Iran made a big mistake tonight, and it will pay for it. The regime in Iran does not understand our determination to defend ourselves and our determination to retaliate against our enemies.
The White House not only expects a strong response, it's suggesting America will help.
Make no mistake, the United States is fully supportive of Israel.
We have made clear that there will be consequences, severe consequences for this attack, and we will work with Israel to make that the case.
Iran, however, is warning it will respond with a larger attack to any Israeli retaliation. About a half hour before the Iranian barrage, Palestinians carried out one of the worst terror attacks inside Israel in recent years. Terrorists from Hebron opened fire on the Tel Aviv light rail and then went on a shooting and stabbing spree in Tel Aviv, murdering 7 Israelis. And on Wednesday, Hezbollah continued to launch rockets at northern Israeli communities, while Israel continued with its targeted raids on Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
All right, Julie, thank you so much. Jonathan Conricus is a former IDF spokesman and a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. He joins us now from Tel Aviv. Jonathan, thanks for being with us. After the attack in April, Israel's response was restrained. What's the thinking of how Israel responds this time around?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me. I think that we will see a different Israeli response. It will be much more powerful and much more impactful. It depends, in my mind, on 2 different issues. One, what will the strategic aim be? What will Israel want to achieve strategically in the long term? And 2, what kind of support will Israel get from the United States of America, and how well can Israel align its own strategy with that of U.S. foreign policy? There are, in my mind, 3 different types of targets that Israel can strike. It could be either seats of government and the leaders themselves of the Iranian regime. It can be the economic military infrastructure that supports Iran's malign activities in the region, what enables them to export weapons and money to different terrorist organizations like Hamas and Hezbollah. And the third bucket or type of targets could be the ever important Iranian nuclear military facilities. It really depends on what Israel wants to achieve, but Israel has the ability to strike all of those, and we'll have to see how well Israel aligns itself with the U.S., and then there will be an Israeli response.
Well, you mentioned the nuclear facilities. Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett is calling this an opportunity to take out Iran's nuclear program. Do you think that is likely?
Well, I definitely agree, and former Prime Minister Bennett has been, I think he was the first Israeli Prime Minister to enact a different strategy and to promote a different strategy that wants to take the battle directly to Iran. Sadly, that has not been Israeli strategy for the last 15, 20 years. Maybe now Israel will change, and maybe now Israel will take action against this regime. Israel has in the past, in history, Israel has taken unilateral action against nuclear military programs by tyrannical regimes. It took out the Iraqi nuclear plan in 1981 and the Syrian one in 2007. So this wouldn't be the first one. But I think that it's definitely something that should be on the table. And if and when Israel does such a thing, it of course needs strong and very well coordinated efforts together with the U.S., not necessarily U.S. participating in the strike, but that the U.S. sees eye to eye with Israel in this matter.
Jonathan, with Hamas and Hezbollah, you could say, on their heels, and 2 maybe failed attacks against Israel, how vulnerable is Iran right now? Are they vulnerable at all?
Iran is vulnerable, and I think that vulnerability has been on full display for quite a while. Israel hasn't really pounced on it, but Iran is vulnerable. And as you say correctly, there's a very direct link between Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran, because the Iranians spend about $1 billion every year to Hezbollah in order to equip Hezbollah with the best and massive amounts of weapons in Lebanon, so that would serve as something of a deterrent against Israel striking Iranian nuclear facilities. That deterrent, I'm not sure, exists to such a similar level anymore. Hezbollah, I think, would have wanted to strike back at Israel much harder after Israel took out Hassan Nasrallah, their leader. It hasn't. And I think that's mostly due to a lack of capacity, not a shortcoming in will. So there's definitely a new situation here. Iran is exposed, and I think that in the coming days, we will see exactly how exposed Iran is and what Israel will do in retaliation for this massive attack against Israel last night.
You know, Jonathan, in the U.S., when we hear missiles are launched in Israel, we take it for granted because of the Iron Dome. Okay, so Israel's missile defense system successfully defended against this massive attack yesterday. So consider, without this system, what would Jerusalem and Tel Aviv look like today?
Oh, horrible. There would be tremendous destruction. There would be structural damage. There would be casualties. Luckily, only one person was killed last night. As ironically as that is, he was a Palestinian from Gaza who was in the southern part of Judea and Samaria, and a rocket fell on him and he was killed. But other than that, no bodily harm. But if we didn't have the Iron Dome, the David Sling, and the Arrow, and by the way, it's important for me as an Israeli to take this good opportunity and say thank you. Thank you to the United States of America for many years of investing together in joint air defense programs. All of the systems that I just said, Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow, which are the three different layers of Israeli air defenses, are joint programs that have been made possible through congressional funding and through joint development between Israel and the U.S. And they, for the second time, have proved that the investment was really in place, and they have saved countless lives. And that's an opportunity for me as an Israeli to say thank you for all the good Americans watching it who have had some kind of influence in telling their elected officials to support congressional aid packages to Israel and to continue joint R&D between Israel and the U.S.
All right, everyone, that is Jonathan Conricus. And as always, Jonathan, we thank you so much for joining us today and bringing your insights.
Amazing how Jonathan really spelt it up very clearly what Israel is fighting against, and how important the Iron Dome is. I was reading a message that came through tonight that it was almost miraculous that all those three aspects of the Iron Dome were able to work as well as they did, and even more so, because apparently, according to what was put out tonight, was actually saying we couldn't really do it. We couldn't have handled all that without it working in a more or less a supernatural way over and above what it can do, because it is very clever. But Johnson also pointed out some of the three options that Israel has. Can either take out the leaders of Iran, and I would go straight to the next one, which I think is the most important one, is to take out the nuclear facilities, because Iran, once it's got full access to everything it needs in order to have a nuclear weapon, it wouldn't be afraid to use it.
No.
So we're foolish, are we not?
No.
To allow it to continue.
Correct. And to allow them to get so close to completing it. And that's the absolute shocking, policy of Obama and others with the JCPOA. Really, I totally agree.
Well, I remember what is probably, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even less, when Netanyahu spoke at the UN, I think it was, and how cross he was, and talking about how the West is so foolish to allow Iran to even develop.
The evidence was there but they don't stick to the agreement. So this idea that they stopped developing the nuclear weapons
and wanted it just
is
for
a joke.
other reasons, you know,
and
like
there are wicked diplomats out there who are saying, oh, the result of this is that Iran's going to speed up their program, you know, as though they haven't been developing it already. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and another thing I noted from Jonathan's discourse there was actually $1 billion a year Iran funds Hezbollah, $1 billion a year. So it's able to, you know, fight against Israel competently if they hadn't had the invention of what Israel has done.
So there's a fourth thing I would add, by the way. I think it was very important what he said, those three things. I can't remember what the third one was. But the fourth one is, after whacking them, you've got to absolutely throttle them with sanctions. So they can't. The last thing you want is to lift sanctions and let them sort of start spending money on terrorism again. And by the way, I noticed, I think CBN are absolutely wonderful. But I disagree with use of the term retaliation, because it's retribution. And the difference is that retribution is vengeance or judgment in response to a criminal act. Retaliation is tit for tat, oh, he said, she said, and oh, we want to have a kind of balance of opinion. No, retribution is execution. It's a judgment.
I always keep going back to the Second World War. Would we call it that when we fought back against Hitler's bombardment, especially of the Luftwaffe coming over into the United Kingdom and carpet bombing many of our cities as well? You know, so when we went back, was it fair to say, well, that's retribution when we bombed Dresden?
No, well, Dresden is one of those ones which really, because my wife's family come from that area, which is really a sensitive one, because we absolutely walloped. You know, Bomber Harris's policy was to bring Germany to its knees by bombing the civilian populations, and it worked. But people could say, certainly with today's mindset, that it was definitely disproportionate. It was, you know, the factories, they had factories in Meissen, they had factories, you know, doing porcelain, which was important for the war effort. But to take out, you know, the historic centre of Dresden was difficult to justify. So that, for me, isn't a brilliant example. But Israel don't bomb. They're not bombing all the civilian populations. They're targeting all the terrorist and military infrastructure.
Yeah. Very clever.
Yeah.
Can we deal with some more of the emails?
Yeah, okay, so I've got many. Glenda says, hi, there are a lot of Iranians who do not want any Jews murdered by their leaders. There are lots of Christians there, and most are ex-Muslims. We should pray for them all. Totally agree. Two have come in side by side. One was from Les. Could present events concerning Israel lead up to Ezekiel 38? Certainly a reason to sit up and pay attention. Jesus said in Luke 21:28, so when all these things begin to happen, look up, stand and look up, for your salvation is near. He did not say to worry or be anxious, but to look up. Jesus is coming again, God's in control. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. That's John 14:27. Then Ian writes, Ian wouldn't have known that Les has written, but he writes this: I believe strongly the stage is being set for Ezekiel 38 and 39.
Oh, wow.
Also, if you look what Islam is doing around the world, and have been for some time, they're trying to control the food industry, something at all the corner shops. If you can control the food industry, you can control a country. Finally, I know the end is written, it is written Israel shall win. However, at what cost? I believe that British people could end up going over to fight. I would not rule out doing that if God played it heavy on my heart, says Ian.
What happened last night as well, it isn't spoken of very much, but the United Kingdom did intervene and help last night. I don't know to what extent, but certainly those that are out there, particularly on the ships as well, and other parts. Maybe there were pilots that helped, I don't know, the RAF, but to what extent there was help from the United Kingdom.
Our friend Yeshua Evangelist goes even further than you would go, Howard, on this. I'm not going to read it, or should I?
Well, it's an opinion by a viewer.
Okay, it's an opinion by a viewer. I believe Israel should nuke Iran.
It's an opinion from
Gaza,
a viewer.
along with Lebanon and Syria. I'm sorry for laughing, but that would certainly have some fallout, not just sort of metaphorically with Israel.
But we can't agree with that, but I understand the sentiment.
Howard, you're a moderate.
Oh, that's what appears to be the case.
And then this is another one from Chris. Benjamin Netanyahu needs to finish the job. He needs to do like David did when he returned from battle and found that the whole village had been plundered and all taken captive. Netanyahu needs to put on the ephod and ask the Lord, should he go after Iran? Iran is just biding time until they have the nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
Biden is a traitor and an imposter. He's calling for a ceasefire to give Hezbollah a chance to regroup and get their communication systems working again.
Yeah.
You see, I mean, Donald Trump's got nothing on our on our viewers, Howard. He's now. I mean, Donald calls him Sleepy Joe, but here we have he's a traitor and an imposter. Yeah.
Carry on, Tim, because
shall I?
Yeah.
This is from Linda and Wayne. Yes, Israel will hammer Iran and will be seen as a great army taking part in Lebanon, Judea and Samaria, part of Jordan and some of Egypt. That is where this peace will come to them. Until the start of the tribulation, when there will be a seldom peace for 3.5 years, then they will run with the Antichrist after them. Excellent show, they say. We get quite a lot into our show.
Okay.
It's not exactly run of the mill.
No.
God does know. I just know God does know something. Please read Psalm 2. He is fulfilling his purpose and plan. We are sure, secure in him. Bless you. Real love from Ruth. You know, why did the nations plot a vain thing against the Lord and against his anointed one? And it says the Lord sits in the heavens and laughs. And it is true how ridiculous all these world authorities and Antonio Guterres is.
Yes. Let us tear their fetters apart and cast away their cords from us. You know, in other words, any hold that they have on Israel and restraining it has to be cut away so they can actually take action and defend themselves. You know what is interesting for me is that I'm supposed to be a pacifist at heart, and yet I can see why the Lord has to step in, or even, if you like, guide Netanyahu how to, with all the different strategies that they've come up with, because they are so small in numbers, you know? It's like a little bit like Gideon's army, such a small, 300 against 100,000 people. Does that not resonate with you as to what happened in the past and will happen again? And Israel will prevail and come against its enemies successfully. In Jesus' name we pray. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Nathan. God bless you.